Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 7th event of TTT and I. I'm delighted to see a lovely crowd in tonight. And I'm going to introduce a man who's come forward to help us with mental health issues that we're looking into. And I want you to give him a huge round of applause. Would you please welcome Peter Finn? Thank you.
Hello everybody, can you hear me okay? At the back? I'm very pleased to be here just to say a few words about the trauma bit of TTT's work. And really honoured actually to have been able to be in contact with Michael and Colette and be invited to just say a few words and introduce myself. I'm Peter Finn, I'm a group analyst, a group psychotherapist. I've been working with populations, I suppose, suffering and recovering from trauma for about 30 years now, in a variety of roles, most recently with young people who are refugees into the UK. It's been quite an experience to engage with that population, really, and support them through their long and desperate struggles for citizenship and a place to belong in this country. It obviously led me to reflect on my own experiences of migration and maybe our own as well in an event like this. And I suppose to think a little bit about the natural concerns regarding human rights and state powers, equalities and injustices that an event like this centres upon, both historically and currently, because I think these things have reared their heads again a little bit in all our minds, given the impact of these Brexit changes and the kind of shifts in all our identities that I think that are being caused and implied. So we're hoping to plan and do a more specific event later on this year on trauma and the Troubles. And have a bit more space to think about this subject together. And really to start a conversation that we hope to continue in a spirit of not so much some fella standing on stage talking to a group, but maybe getting in amongst you and starting a conversation as a community together in a spirit of co-production, which is what I would hope maybe to start a ball rolling this evening. I wanted to just bring a little poetry because I think that's what people do. So I'm going to quote from the O'Keeffe translation of Sweeney Astray, because there's a few words in that I think are very relevant. This is obviously about the siege of the Battle of Moira in 637. Late June 637 was the Battle of Moira. It was one of the early historical, very large battles. I think that in the 1990s there were some archaeological digs there, and there were thousands of bodies and horses that were dug up there. So it seems to have been this very large-scale battle. So we have this fella, a young king called Sweeney, who's in the middle of the battle. And he's in between the hosts, the battle hosts. The vast army on both sides roared in the manner of a herd of stags, so that they raised on high 3 mighty shouts. When Sweeney heard these great cries, he looked up, whereupon turbulence and darkness and fury and giddiness and frenzy and flight, unsteadiness, restlessness and unquiet filled him. Likewise disgust with every place in which he used to be, and desire for every place which he had not reached. His fingers were palsied, his feet trembled, his heart beat quick, his senses were overcome. His sight was distorted, his weapons fell naked from his hands, so that through Ronan's curse he went, like any bird of the air, in madness and imbecility. So he was taken in troubles, this fellow Sweeney, and I think we'd all kind of recognise in that, in those words, this sense of a battle madness, a serious case of PTSD. It's added to later on in the poem, in most of the modern translations. Sweeney is talking about his own experiences, and he says, "I flee at the cry of the heron, as though it were a blow that struck me." So in the middle of all this terrible confusion and tragedy of battle, with all its cruelty and unconscionable acts, something has happened in Sweeney's mind, which has taken over his body. Now, the concept of trauma has entered popular culture in recent years. There's a lot of interest in it. And, people are familiar with primary traumas. The trauma most often people would be aware of it as something that is caused by a single incident, a very great shock. The most common example might be a road traffic accident. But there's, many other forms of trauma. And what we know is still developing. So, we might think, for example, about cumulative traumatic stress or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, complex PTSD, which similarly is caused by repeated, very difficult, very shocking experiences. And not everybody has a trauma reaction after a very great shock. There's a lot that we don't know about resilience and how people kind of recover. But there are also a whole range of other sorts of events that can cause trauma. Very severe and unexpected bereavements that are very deeply shocking to the mind can result in trauma. It can be a traumatic bereavement. And there are many forms of trauma that are only more recently being talked about. Hidden forms of domestic trauma that perhaps fall more on the women and children than necessarily they might fall upon the men. And one definition of trauma is that it makes us disoriented in time, in space, and relationship, all at the one time. And it can be that it takes a very, very long time to recover. And perhaps time may not heal all wounds. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of trauma and recovery. Because there is something about how important messages can get embedded in our minds at a time of trauma. And you might all be very familiar with that expression, whatever you say nothing. Now, it was a very helpful maxim for many people over many years, because it prevented a lot of upset, a lot of disagreement or a lot of strife in conversations. And it may have kept people relatively safe at a time when they felt very unsafe. But the problem with some messages that can get embedded in our minds at the time of very great stress is that much later on they might get in the way. So I'd like to shift that around, really, to encourage us all to, whatever we say something. Talk about difficult experiences and these damages that affect so many people in perhaps hidden ways in our communities. Because trauma is a social event. It's not, if you experience a trauma, you may feel very estranged from yourself, from your own mind and body. You may feel very isolated. But actually most traumas are a social event. Certainly the trauma of war. I think we might agree that many other traumas should be social events. We should be healthier and more transparent in being able to talk to them and be able to help those people who are survivors, who might be amongst us. So the only other thing I would like to just say about trauma and recovery is that there's lots of ways of recovering from trauma. You can talk about it, don't talk about it, do something else, do the dishes, play board games for 30 years to deal with your trauma. It's not helpful if people are the kind of passive recipients of help or support. So many people have been affected by the events of the Troubles that it's very widespread Many, many people have been dealing with trauma for many decades and years. And we need to kind of respect what each one of us might have already learned about trauma, and maybe invite you into a conversation where we could bring together all that hidden knowledge that might be in our community as a whole to understand a whole range of ways in which we can recover. I've no doubt that there's much more knowledge of how to understand or deal with trauma than in this audience than there is in this stage. So I think maybe a part of how TTT would like to address this question of historic psychological wounds is to invite you into a conversation which we share as equals, and where the idea of recovery is something that we can all build and grow together. I haven't been in the conversation we're about to hear tonight, but it strikes me as an incredibly courageous thing to be happening. I'm quite humbled already, really, at the idea of it. It hasn't even started. I hope that we can all take a little bit of that courage and compassion for each other across experiences of conflict or distress, and bring a little bit of that back together into a conversation we share. So the invitation really is to make contact with us, with the team, Colette and Michael, Ivan and myself, through the TTT website. And we'll be around this evening to be available to chat and talk. And we will put forward an event. If you've got any ideas about an event you might like to come to, we'd be delighted to hear about them. And we would hope very much that you'll come and join in the conversation, which we might have in a variety of ways. Thanks for your time this evening. I hope you enjoy this event. I know I certainly will. Take care.
That was Peter Finn, who's very generously come on board with us to help us with matters of mental health caused by the trauma of the Troubles. Our next speaker is one of my favourite lecturers. I spent some time under him at St Mary's, and he's going to give you a little brief history of how this great event has come to be. And his name is Dr. Ivan Gibbons. Would you give him a huge round of applause? Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Right. Hello. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Hammersmith Irish Cultural Centre. My name is Ivan Gibbons, and in addition to being a board member here at ICC, I have also been involved with the Troubles, Tragedy and Trauma project since it was established in 2016 by Michael O'Hare. Now, TTT aims to highlight legacy issues in Northern Ireland and encourage reconciliation. And to date, TTT has presented 6 conferences on victims, the future of unionism in Northern Ireland, women in Ulster politics, journalism in Northern Ireland, and interviews with the late Seamus Mallon, as well as with Labour stalwarts Lord Alf Dubs and Baroness Mayblood, who have had extensive experience in Northern Ireland politics. At this stage, I'd also like to acknowledge, obviously, the Irish Cultural Centre for working so closely with us to organise these events. I'd like to thank William, the centre manager, and his staff, in particular Jerry, and also to welcome Ursula, who's the personal assistant to Richard Moore, and also to show our gratitude to the Irish Government Reconciliation Fund for obviously assisting projects like this. Now, tonight's event will be chaired by the renowned journalist Peter Taylor, whose books and television programmes have examined the Northern Ireland conflict from the perspective of the 3 parties involved, the IRA, Loyalists, and the British government and its security forces. Peter will be in conversation with Richard Moore, who lost his sight when hit by a rubber bullet in Derry when he was 10 years old in 1972. Richard is founder of the international charity Children in Crossfire, and his uncle, Gerard McKinney, was shot dead on Bloody Sunday in January 1972. Charles Inness was a captain in the Royal Artillery in Derry in 1972 and fired the rubber bullet which blinded Richard. They met again some years later in 2006, and since then have become friends and worked together on various peace and international development projects. And so, without further ado, it's time to meet our guests for tonight's session. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
That's great, thank you. There we go. These are all looking well.
Thank you all very much indeed. It's lovely to see so many of you here this evening, and it's a great privilege for me to have been asked to moderate the session this evening with two remarkable men. And I never would have thought because when the incident happened way back in 1972, 3-4 weeks after Bloody Sunday, that was my introduction to Northern Ireland, my introduction to Derry. I never would have thought at that time that 50 years later, I'd still be covering the Irish conflict. And what's more, I'd be sitting here with these two remarkable people. A soldier who blinded a 10-year-old schoolboy. The fact that they are together and have been together for a long time and gone through a remarkable, excuse the cliche, journey, but it is a remarkable journey. And they are now the best of friends. It's remarkable to think what both have been through, the trauma for Richard, having been blinded 50 years ago by Charles, and Charles who lived with the trauma of having blinded a 10-year-old schoolboy. And they're now together, reconciled. And the theme of this session this evening is reconciliation. And reconciliation has to lie at the heart of dealing with the terrible problem of legacy. I mean, how do we deal with the fallout from these dreadful, painful, traumatic 50 years of conflict? And reconciliation has to lie, in the end, at the very heart of it. And Richard and Charles are the epitome of reconciliation. So tonight, for the first half of the session, I'm going to talk to them both about that day, what happened, the effect it had on them, the remarkable process whereby they came together against all expectations and against all the odds, and how and why they are still together today, as you can see, and how they see the need for reconciliation on a much broader front, and how they think we should try and deal with legacy. So why don't we start with you, Richard?
Yeah.
Just tell us, cast your mind back to that day in the spring of 1972, 3-4 weeks after Bloody Sunday. What were you doing and what happened?
Okay, thank you, Peter. And first of all, just to say thanks very much to Michael O'Hare and Colette and everybody else for inviting me along here tonight. And thanks to Charles for coming as well. What I remember that day was, I was, as Peter pointed out, I was 10 years of age. I was a happy-go-lucky child, really. I was in my primary 6th class, and as normal, we got out of school around 20 past 3. I was very aware that we were living in a war zone. There was shooting incidents down there because there were a police station beside the school, and there was riots down there almost on a daily basis. But that particular day, Peter and I just got out of school as normal, and we just started to race along the bottom of the school football pitch. And as we did so, we had to pass this British Army lookout post that was positioned at the bottom of the school playground, faced up into the school playground, and it was there to protect the police station, which was behind it. But so I remember running up with my friends, and I passed it many, many days. And this particular day, I just remember racing up towards it, and it was literally a race we were involved in. And the next thing I remember is I woke up and I was lying on the school canteen table. My music teacher, Mr. Giles Doherty, he heard the bang. He ran over, he found me lying on the ground and lifted me and carried me over and put me on the school canteen table. And I just remember him saying to me, "What's your name, son?" And I told my name was Richard Moore, and he got a bit of a shock. My nose was completely flattened, my eyeballs were out of their sockets, my face was just a bloody mess, and he wasn't able to identify me. But he got a shock because he knew me very well. I was in his music class. And then the next thing I remember is I woke up in the ambulance. And at that stage, my daddy and my sister were beside me. I lived 2 minutes walk from the school. So my daddy and my sister, somebody obviously ran up to our house and told my daddy had been shot. And so they were on the scene fairly quickly. And I remember my daddy was holding my hand, and one of the ambulance personnel said to me, "Daddy, there's a woman outside. She's very upset. Will we let her in?" And my daddy must have looked out the window and he said, "No, that's his mother. Don't let her in." And he said that because he didn't want my mommy seeing me in the state that I was in.
Richard, can I just ask Charles to think back, because you were responsible for what
Indeed.
Richard has just described happened. What went through your mind, and what did you do, and why did you do it?
Yeah. First of all, I'm certainly in no way a remarkable individual. I'm just an ordinary sort of person. Thank you very much for the compliment. Basically, the police station that Richard has referred to was a nonsensical political expediency requirement so that the authorities could turn around and say it was a complete police coverage, even in the really hard Catholic nationalist areas, there was a police presence. From a military point of view, it was absolutely nonsensical. To get a policeman into this fortress, because that's what it had been turned into, as a small fortress, required 3 armoured vehicles, 25 soldiers permanently based there to bring a policeman into it. And the policeman, when he arrived, was taken straight into the central part of this police station, and in most cases they were pretty frightened. There was absolutely no way that policeman was going to go out and walk down the street as your friendly policeman. Had he done so, he would have been dead within a matter of minutes, and nobody would have come into the place to talk to the policeman, because they would have been seen as collaborators. It was strongly, strongly protected.
Can I just ask
Yes.
you, how did you come to open fire? What was
Right,
happening?
well, just bear with me. Basically, because it was therefore incredibly vulnerable as a place, we had to have an extremely alert sort of guard force, this small guard force. And during the course of the day, there had been quite a lot of aggravation around it, as indeed Richard said, happened on a daily basis. I was called down at about 5 o'clock, and I was commanding the setup at the time. I was called down to see what was going on, and there was a number of views there, and there was a certain amount of aggravation occurring. And I was in command, and I decided to disperse them, and to make them, what we wanted to do was to make them go away. Nothing more, just to get them to go away. Now, the only one could have walked out of the place and remonstrated with them, which would not have been a very clever thing to do in that part of the world, because there was a possibility that there would be somebody with a high-powered rifle not far away, and as had happened not long previously, immediately one dead soldier. So you didn't go out of the thing, you stayed in it, you remonstrated with them, you usually got a bit of banter back, shall we say, of a slightly unfriendly nature. And you then had a choice, only one choice, and that was to use a thing called a rubber bullet gun. And at that time, with the levels of violence that were occurring, the British Army fired thousands of rubber bullets.
Can you just explain what a rubber bullet
Right.
looks like and what it does?
Right. A rubber bullet is a thing that's about that long, with a diameter of that, and it is shaped like a bullet, and it is made out of rubber, and it is propelled by a low explosive small charge. And for example, where I'm sitting here now, the person at the back of the room, if I actually fired it at them, and if it hit them, it would be like being hit by a cricket ball which was running out of steam. And we fired thousands and thousands of these things.
And although it's called a rubber bullet, rubber is really a misnomer because it's absolutely rock solid.
No, there was two sorts. There was one which was made of rubber, which was rubber, but it was very, very solid. And then there was a plastic bullet, which was a totally different thing. But the rubber bullet was actually made of rubber. Basically, we fired vast numbers of them, and people who were reasonably close to them generally got a pretty unpleasant bruise, but that was about it. We had no other means, really, of trying to disperse anybody other than the use of this particular thing.
Water cannon?
Sorry?
Water cannon?
Water cannon we didn't have. There were about four or five in the province at that time. We certainly didn't have them. So basically, we had to use the rubber bullet gun. And as I say, we had fired vast numbers of these things, and by and large, they caused very little problem. So
people in Belfast were killed as a result of being hit by rubber bullets.
Yes.
It's a misnomer to think that they were
harmless.
No,
they're not harmless. I'm not suggesting for one moment they were harmless, but actually, we fired very large numbers of them, and the vast majority of people didn't actually have any serious injury as a result of it.
And when you found out that a 10-year-old schoolboy
Yeah.
had been seriously
I
hurt,
think what I would say is that my aim was absolutely straightforward, and what I wanted to do was to get the people who were there to disperse. So I fired. It was my decision. I wasn't ordered to do it by anybody else. It was my decision, and I fired the rubber bullet. And somebody went down. I was then called away, and immediately called away to deal with something else. The people who were there had all gone, and so as far as I was concerned, at that specific moment, we had achieved what we wanted. They had gone, and I was elsewhere.
And left behind was 10-year-old.
At the time, I didn't know how old he was. I didn't know who he was. I knew absolutely nothing really about him at all. At that particular moment, I did not know.
And when you discovered that you had seriously injured,
right. Well, what then happened?
A 10-year-old.
Yeah. What then happened was I think it was probably about half an hour later. My boss, further up the command chain, said to me, I need to come and talk to you. There's a very unpleasant and very serious situation has arisen. And I'm coming down now, and I'll be with you in a very short time. he came down and he then took me into, we had a briefing room, took me into the briefing room, and he said, sit down, Charles. So I sat down, and he said, that rubber bullet you fired, it may well be, you hit a 10-year-old boy with it, and he may well die from his injuries. He's severely injured. The shock and the horror and the absolute distress I suffered at that moment was simply horrific. And anybody in this audience would understand what I'm saying when you're absolutely shocked and horrified.
And
horrified.
that shock and horror and trauma stayed with you, didn't it?
It like all these things, a shock and horror and distraughtness and so on. Unfortunately, I didn't have much time to dwell too much on it because there were so many really unpleasant events occurring at that particular time.
Now, Richard, of course, you did not know who had fired the bullet. You did not know why the bullet had been fired. What did you have any thought about the soldier who had done this to you?
In the immediate times, I really didn't. I didn't know for the first month. I didn't know that I was shot. Even when I woke up in the ambulance and all that sort of stuff, I didn't realise I was shot. And then I suppose I didn't know I was going to be blind for the rest of my life until about a month after I was shot. And you know, a 10-year-old boy thinks like a 10-year-old boy, you know. I didn't delve into things too much in the early days about who was the soldier, where was the soldier, does the soldier ever think about me and things like that. But as I got older, I began to think about that, you know, my late teenage years and my early 20s and stuff. I often wondered about the British soldier. I used to be walking around the streets of the Craigan with my friends or whatever and stopped at checkpoints and all the things that anybody here might realise had happened in Northern Ireland at the time. And I used to wonder, I used to walk down past Rosemount Police Barracks where I was shot and wonder, was the soldier in there looking out at me or whatever. So you do get a bit curious.
Did you regard the British Army as being an army of occupation?
I did. I mean,
as a 10-year-old boy?
I wouldn't have been that heavy on it. You know, I wouldn't have used that terminology or anything. I was very aware that the British Army were on the streets of Derry and they weren't welcome. That my community had suffered at the hands of the British Army big time. You know, like you talked about Bloody Sunday there. No, did we talk about Bloody Sunday? But we talked about it earlier on back in the room. That's why I mentioned it. But you know, Bloody Sunday happened in January '72. I was blinded in May '72. So, you know, at least 3 or 4 of the people, or I think up to 7 of the people, were from the Craigan estate. And Michael Kelly lived on the street below me. The Nashes lived 2 streets above me. William McKinney lived Westway, which is just round the corner from me. And my uncle Jared was shot dead on Bloody Sunday. So the army weren't seen as a friendly force. And, you know, we did have fear of the army. We were afraid of the army. We saw them as people who were dangerous. And then obviously I'd experienced being shot by Charles as well. And, you know, so you had all that. But, you know, I wasn't military minded. I wasn't angry minded. I wasn't sort of, if a soldier spoke to me in the street, I'd have spoke back to him.
Did you think anything about the person, the soldier who had blinded you? Did you wonder about him, what he was like, why he'd done it?
Yes, I did. I wondered, you know, on reflective moments. Like, see, to be honest with you, Peter, I didn't think about blindness a lot. You know, I accepted blindness. I got on with it. There was occupational hazards with blindness that I had to deal with. And there was emotional sides around blindness as well. Like I always say, there's 2 sides of blindness. One is the emotional side, and the other is the physical side, the practical side of blindness. You know, I'm up here with you today. If you don't take me off the stage, Peter, then I'll be sitting here tomorrow. And that's the long and short of it.
I'll be here, promise.
And it's not the first time I've been left behind. But, so, I mean, but I cope with blindness very well. And I'm not saying that as a remark about me. I think it's more about other people, really. But there was times when in the privacy of my own thoughts, I thought about the soldier. I used to wonder, did I ever think about me? You know, my life, the challenges that I had, you know, going through school, having to learn Braille, having to cope with not being able to play football, having to deal with what clothes should I wear, you know, who picks my clothes for me. I'm not able to drive a car, not being able to see my children. All them things all shaped the person I am. I set up Children in Crossfire, the international charity, I believe is a direct result of what happened to me. A lot of the good things in my life, the amazing experiences I had as a blind person. You know, I'm on the receiving end of so much generosity and kindness in my life. I really am, always am. And even now, like a Michael O'Hare and people like that who are just extremely kind to me. And I'm at the receiving end of that. So, but in the privacy of my own thoughts, I often thought, I wonder, does a soldier ever think about me? Does he ever think about the legacy of what happened that day for me? Does he wonder how I'm getting on? Does he wonder, am I coping? And then I wondered how the Troubles affected him. There were times I thought maybe he was killed in the Troubles for all I know.
Why did you decide to get in touch with the soldier who shot you, to get in touch?
There are a couple of things, really. The first thing is that, you know, just pure curiosity. Derry people call it nosiness. So I was just dying to know a bit more about the soldier. The second thing was, I suppose, the more serious reasons where, you know, when you peel everything back, the life that I've had, the personality I've had, the journey for me has been dictated by blindness. And my blindness was a result of being shot. So I felt I was in a relationship with somebody that I didn't know. When you peel it all back, my experience in life comes back, involves two people, me and the soldier. And I always felt I was looking into a shadow. There was a person there, and I didn't know who they were or anything about them.
What did you say in your letter?
Well, in my letter, obviously they tracked down the soldier, and I didn't even know his name at that stage. And I don't think I knew his name anyway, but so in the letter I was trying to put myself in Charles's position. I was thinking he'd be thinking, what's this guy up to? What does he want to know me for? You know, is there something else behind all this? So I tried to convey in the letter, I'm a balanced individual. Well, I think I'm a balanced individual anyway, and that I have coped with life. I have got over what happened to me. I have no anger towards you. And I think that together, if it works out, that we meet up, we have maybe something to offer. And that's what I try to convey in the letter.
Charles, when you get the letter, how do you get the letter? And how do you react when you see who the letter is from?
If I may just go back for a second, the business of having fired this thing and the absolute shock and the horror and the distraught state I was in and the really feeling absolutely dreadful, which did last for a period of time, that did wear off, and there's no doubt about that. But the sadness and the regret of what I had done stayed with me. And there were times when I kept thinking back to this and thinking, I wish I had not done it. And indeed, had I known the outcome, I most certainly would not have fired that rubber bullet, because if I had intended to seriously injure a 10-year-old boy, I would not be sitting here now. I would be a thoroughly unpleasant individual who was not worthy of anything. I had no intention whatsoever to cause any form of serious injury. All I wanted to do was achieve the business whereby they went away. So the sadness and the regret stayed with me. And then I got rang up years later, in fact in 2005, by a Northern Ireland policeman who knew me, but I didn't actually know him. And he said to me, he said, I'm so-and-so RUC, you probably don't remember my name. And I said, yeah, I most certainly don't remember your name. And he said, could I come and talk to you? And I said, yeah, well, but would you mind telling me what you want to come and talk about? So he said, Richard Moore. So, oh yeah. He said, do you know Richard Moore? So I said, yeah, I bloody well do know Richard Moore. I certainly know the name. And I said, yes, please do, come and talk to me. So he appeared, and he then told me that the care that Richard had had, and the love and support and encouragement from his family, from the great medical treatment he'd had and the support from the hospital, his schooling, how he had been so well helped in his schooling at university and had made a really good professional life for himself, and how he had achieved so much. And I was absolutely delighted to hear this, though still very, very sad that indeed, as a result of my actions, he was still blind. And then this chap said to me, I've got a letter here from Richard. Richard will understand if you don't want to receive the letter, but he hopes you will receive it, be happy to receive it. So I said, yes, absolutely, I'd be delighted. So I read this letter, and it was the most superb document I've ever read in my life, absolutely outstanding, with not the vaguest hint of any animosity towards me, and expressing a wish that perhaps we could at some stage meet. And I just felt that there was a great weight lifted off me at that particular moment.
And of course you do meet. Writing the letter is one thing, and your hope was that you would get the response that you did get as a response. But meeting him is very different. Meeting your assailant is a very different thing from actually writing a letter to him. So when you were about to meet him, were you apprehensive? Were you nervous? Were you cool, calm and collected? What were your emotions?
The person you see now is the person I am, very confident individual, really. But when I found out Charles's name, it opened up emotions within me I didn't think I had. I thought it really is incredible when I think about it, that I got very weepy, I got very nervous. And all my life, I'd never felt like that. And then we started on the journey to Belfast Airport, and I made a decision to go and meet Charles on my own, because I felt I could deal with it better on my own, without having to talk to anybody. And
you meet at the airport, do you?
I flew over to Edinburgh Airport and got a taxi to a hotel there, and so I was there early. Charles didn't know I was coming in early, but I was in early, so I just sat in the hotel foyer and waited for Charles to arrive. And so I was, there's a lot of emotions go through your head, and it's sometimes even hard for me to get back to it now. Not because of emotional reasons, just to really remember what it was like. First of all, I was meeting a British soldier. And my community had suffered enormously at the hands of the British Army. So I really felt I was letting down other victims. I couldn't get the Bloody Sunday families out of my head. I was thinking about my mum and my daddy. And, their pain, their hurt. I took a photograph of my mummy and daddy with me in my pocket. Now, my mummy was alive then. And, she knew everything that was happening. And I took a photograph of my children and all as well, because I just felt, one, to be with me, and two, I could give Charles, I wanted Charles to see the friendly faces of my mommy and daddy and stuff like that, But, so I was feeling very nervous. I was feeling guilty from now and again. But I really wanted to do this. I really wanted to do it. And I also, I was afraid I would cry when I met him. And that was one of my biggest fears, that I would become a gibbering wreck. And I'm glad I didn't. And, and to be honest, when Charles stepped out of the shadows, which is what it felt like for me, in many ways it was like that, because I heard him coming up the steps. And he put his hand on my shoulder and we shook hands. And, that was remarkable. A 33-year-old mystery come to an end. A 33-year-old journey in many ways. And I always think, I always describe it, Charles, in your absence. I don't say it when you're around, but I'll say it now, sure. I felt like I was on a first date.
I think we'll stop there. And Charles, so what was your reaction at the prospect of going to meet your victim, your unintended victim?
It was very, very straightforward as far as I was concerned, because tremendously fortified by the remarkable letter. And I thought, this is truly an absolutely outstanding human being, and I really want to go and meet him. I really do want to meet as soon as we possibly can arrange it. So I didn't have any apprehension at all. I walked into the foyer, I walked up, I tapped him on the shoulder, and I said, "Hi, Richard, it's Charles." And from that moment on, it was the beginning of a truly remarkable friendship from that moment on. And we had so much in common. Our basic values of life, despite the fact that we come from totally different backgrounds, despite that, our basic values in life are absolutely the same. We're one and the same. And we got on right from the beginning really, really well, absolutely superbly, and has remained so for years and years. And there we are. Yeah.
Did you say, "I'm sorry"?
Not at that particular moment.
Did you expect
no.
Charles to say, "I'm sorry"?
No, I didn't. And, you know, I have to be honest and say that I didn't ask for an apology. I didn't feel I needed an apology. And, you know, some people did say to me that they wouldn't have met Charles unless they apologised. And it's like everything else in life, isn't it? I mean, everybody has a view on it, and who's to say who's right and who's wrong? The only thing, Charles did apologise to me 6 years later. I didn't ask him to, he volunteered it. And I didn't expect it, I didn't need it, but when it came, it was nice. It was nice.
What did you say in your apology? Can you remember?
I can't remember, to be
Oh
honest.
no, I remember. I mean, we were sitting in the Everglades Hotel in Derry.
Exactly what I said.
How do you think you ended up on a walking stick? No, I do remember it. And, you know, I think Charles is basically a nice person. He is. And I know there's some people see him as a British soldier, and there are probably people down there see him as a British soldier, and that's fine. But I got to know Charles. My true belief in life is that sometimes people do terrible things, but behind it all, they're human beings. And when I met Charles, the soldier trappings dropped away, and I saw a man who was a grandfather, who was a father, who was a husband. And, you know, he might have had a different journey from me, might have different lifestyle from me, 40 years a soldier, 600 years of military lineage and Charles's family and all that. You know, so that's a very different life from me. But at the end of the day, I saw someone who was just a human being at the end of the day. So the reason why I come out and do these things with Charles, Peter, is not is in a way to try and show that it is possible, very possible, to move on. He doesn't have to give up anything that he believes in. I'm certainly not giving up anything that I believe in. But we can move on. We can. And we owe it to ourselves, maybe. But, so, what I didn't want was people not liking Charles. I didn't want that. So I would kind of used to say to Charles, you know, you're probably going to be asked the apology question tonight. And I just wanted Charles to answer the question the way that he talks to me. And that was the way he's talked tonight, which is, you know, that he never meant to blind anybody. And if he had realised he was going to blind somebody, he wouldn't have fired it.
Can I just, sorry.
And just to finish that, and I will finish that, and, you know, so in the process of saying that, I said, Charles, look, you're probably going to be asked to say sorry. And Charles said to me, Richard, I am sorry.
Right. Charles says, "I'm sorry, Richard." Do you forgive him? Do you say, or does Charles ask for your forgiveness?
No, Charles never asked for my forgiveness, and I do forgive him. And I think forgiveness is a very personal thing. Forgiveness for me, and again, I'm no great philosopher here, but I'm just going to say what it is for me. Forgiveness for me is about me, not about Charles. You know, forgiveness is, let's say, a mechanism or a method through which I can learn to live with what happened. And I can let go of any feelings of anger, hatred, bitterness, whatever they might be. Now, I never had any anger or bitterness, but I really began to realize in my young adult years what I was experiencing was forgiveness. And I just saw the benefits of that. Not for Charles. And again, it's not about a high moral ground. It's not about, hello, Charles, come over here while I just want you to know that I forgive you. I hope you appreciate that. It's not about that. In fact, that's the misuse of forgiveness in my mind. Forgiveness is about you finding a way that you can find contentment in your heart and in your head. And that's why I'm happy. That's why I'm content. That's how I'm able to call him, Charles, a friend. And that's how we're able to get on together, because I have been able to find peace within me.
Charles, so you are forgiven. Did you assume that you had been forgiven, or was it important that it is put into words?
I don't think I've ever been, I've never been particularly worried about that particular aspect at all. What I have been, what to me is fundamentally much more important is the relationship that Richard and I have, and the great friendship we have, and our ability to try and help people from both sides of the divide. Nobody in Northern Ireland has a monopoly on violence. It doesn't matter whether it was a policeman, a soldier, a prison officer, some poor girl with her baby, a husband. Everybody in some form or another, almost everybody has suffered. Nobody's got no, it's not just one part of the community. And anything that he and I can do to try and help heal the problem there, and try and bring the communities together, we would do. Right from the first time Richard and I met, fundamentally, the friendship was made there and then. We are great friends. To the level whereby when I die, there are going to be 2 people who speak at my funeral, and Richard is going to be one of them.
I think the relationship speaks powerfully for itself. Just one brief last question, and if it could be a brief answer, because we're about to have an interval. What are your feelings about a statute of limitations that would apply to both sides, which is tantamount to an amnesty? Is this a realistic way of drawing a line under what you and thousands of other people have been through? Amnesty?
To me, you're asking? Yeah.
Yes, both of you.
Sorry. Well, my view is that drawing a line under what happened for who, because I don't think it's going to help the victims. And, I think that it is wrong to make a decision to ask people who have been so badly hurt in the Troubles to ask them to not expect justice. And I think every society owes that. And we shouldn't be afraid of justice. We shouldn't be afraid of it.
Charles, should we draw a line under the Troubles?
I think it's an incredibly difficult one, because, as I say, the problem is right across the whole spectrum. And are we going to chase people who blew up soldiers or shot soldiers years ago? Are we going to try and trace them and prosecute them? Are we going to prosecute policemen? Are we going to do, I don't know. If you do that, I believe that the thing just goes on and on. So from my perspective, I think it is a very difficult one, and certainly it's going to open a lot of wounds in many areas. I can completely understand parents of a soldier who's shot wanting justice. I can completely understand families in the bog side of the Craigens whose children or wives or friends were shot by soldiers wanting to have justice. But where does this end? It's 50 years on from 1972. Where do you stop? And I wouldn't like to make a judgment on it. I don't know is the answer.
That just from what both of you have said just illustrates
I did.
how incredibly difficult it
Yeah.
is to reach a way which is acceptable to both sides and all participants and the families of those who have lost their loved ones, to find a solution to this that keeps everybody happy. It's virtually impossible, I fear. I'd like to say thank you for a fascinating and uplifting conversation. We get so many examples of bad and tragic news out of Northern Ireland over the past 50 years, and it's been refreshing and uplifting to hear a story such as
May I just
yours.
finish on one little... to give you some idea of how completely barking mad Richard is.
Easy, Charles, easy.
The day we met, and we got on so well together, and we had a wonderful lunch, and we had, shall we say, a glass of two of this, that, and the other. And Richard eventually said, well, I'm going to be, I need to get the taxi to go to get the airplane to fly home. And I said, no, Richard, you're not going to get taxis. I'll drive you there. I'll drive you across. I'll drive you down there. So I drove him down, and the reception desk had been made aware that Richard had needed help to get on the airplane. And so we were laughing and joking, and I took him up to the desk, and we were in a very jolly mood. And anyway, this lady then took Richard on to get onto the airplane, and she said, oh, that friend of yours, he's a really good man. You must have known him a long time. No, I've only just met him, and that's the man who blinded me. To which she thought, this man's a lunatic.
Okay, so there will now be, as they say, a short intermission for 10 minutes, 10 minutes, and then if you'd all like to come back again, the floor is yours to ask whatever you want to ask of our very special guest. I think a round of applause. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, first question. First question?
How you doing?
You can't be shy.
How you doing? Just thanks very much for that. Very interesting. Very, very good. Like, so, just quickly to ask the soldier and fair play. Like, have you been back to Northern Ireland or Ireland since your time as a soldier in Ireland, Northern Ireland?
I absolutely love Derry, or Londonderry, whichever the persuasion. I've been back there a number of times. I stayed with Richard in his house in Derry, and I'm going back there in a few months' time, and again we will meet in June in Derry. I love it, and I go back to Ireland. I love Ireland. I love the Irish people, and I'm delighted to be there.
Gentleman at the back.
Thank you both, and thank you all. This is remarkable. I wanted to sort of pick up where we left off, actually, with this sort of awkward triangle of reconciliation, justice, and a word that I use in my work for what it's worth, which is reckoning, which is, the third side of the same triangle. It's a harsh word. It means staring history in the face and coming to terms with what's happened. I'm bored of myself. I shan't talk about myself, but I worked a lot in Bosnia, where there can be no reconciliation because there is no reckoning. The atrocities have never been admitted. They've never been reckoned with. And they are denied or justified to the point that you can win the Nobel Prize and think the Srebrenica massacre was a good idea. Ireland is interesting, isn't it? Because it's sort of halfway there. Bloody Sunday was skirted, covered up for decades. I'm interested really to ask both of you how your remarkable, parable, I think it is a parable what you've done, it is a model, can go from the personal level that you have espoused this evening to us, lucky people, can become something actually deeper in terms of that word reckoning and reconciliation, particularly Charles. I mean, you know, the skirting around Bloody Sunday is almost as outrageous as the atrocity itself. The sort of games around the disappearance of Jean McGonville are almost as awful as the act itself. Where do we take your reconciliation to a point of reckoning, staring it in the face and making what you have done so admirably into something universal?
Richard, would you like to
Aye.
answer that?
It's hard to know how to answer a question like that. I think that,
Reckoning.
yeah, I do think that there's real challenges with it, you know, there is. And there is no right answer, to be honest. If me and Charles had it or I had it, then we'd be very wealthy people, never mind anything else. But I do think there's got to be some level of understanding. I think too many people at the minute are trying to win the war. You know, you did this and that's it. I did that and that's it. I think there's just got to be an understanding that if we're going to draw a line, if we're trying to draw lines, then I think we should draw a line at the understanding that we all hurt each other. And we all played a part in the conflict in some way or another. And you know, and it's only when we begin to accept the fact I hurt you and you hurt me that we begin to figure out ways that we can learn to love together. And that's what I think reconciliation is. Reconciliation isn't about winning. It isn't about gaining a high moral ground. It isn't about who's right and who's wrong. It's about finding a way that you can accept the past, draw a line under it, and move forward. You know, I remember my brother in the kitchen with my mammy, just after I got out of hospital. And we lived in a small house in the Craigan, and you could hear, my mammy spent all day in the kitchen anyway. And I remember my brother, who was 17 at the time, and I was having a real go with my mammy. And he says there, you know, they murdered my Uncle Jared. They blinded Richard. It's time to give her own back. And my mammy said to him, if you want to help Richard, go on there and help Richard. But you're not helping Richard by hurting somebody else. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's where it's got to begin.
If I just add a personal reflection on the Bloody Sunday families, many of whom I know well. One family, the McKinneys, I interviewed Ida McKinney, who sadly died last year, and her daughter. They lost husband and father. They both told me they forgive the soldiers, and they forgive them because they don't want that dreadful moment to ruin their lives. And I think that's the kind of thing that you're talking about.
Exactly.
Isn't it? Exactly.
Yeah.
Next question, gentleman there. This gentleman just in front of you. Yeah.
Even I could see him.
I feel a bit like Fiona Bruce.
Welcome to the club, Peter.
Thank you very much for your remarkable conversation. Northern Ireland has had a different situation in the last 25 years in that a whole generation, maybe a bit more, have not had the type of experiences that took place 50 years ago. At the same time, without getting bogged down in the details, we know that the political situation has become a little more, shall we say, challenging. So my question is, how can you use your experience to emphasise, particularly to those who hadn't had that experience. But we must, as I say, work to reconciliation and not be tempted by all the problems which are happening at the moment, Brexit, whatever.
Charles, like you.
Well, one of the things that has impressed me enormously was going back, in fact, to Ireland last year when a lot of this was going on, and talking to young people from both sides, and saying, you know, the political instability and so on and so forth, and these are people from both sides, and the answer I got was the same. What the hell have politicians got to do with it? We're living our lives.
Yeah.
And we're going to go on living our lives, and we're going to go on trying to make Ireland a better place. And we want to have a situation whereby we can learn and we can understand what happened all those years ago, and there's no way we want to go down that course again. And it doesn't matter what the political atmosphere is, as we as ordinary people are concerned, we do not want to go there again. We want to have civilized, normal, decent lives and respect those who have a slightly different view on life or whatever, different religion, so on and so forth, but respect them, enjoy their company, and let's go forward as people who are civilized, know how to behave, know how to conduct themselves, and we're not going back there. We are not going back there, whatever is said in any direction.
I think that's a really important question, because one of the things that concerns me is that the post-ceasefire generation, the post-Good Friday Agreement generation, many of them have little understanding, knowledge of what happened in the preceding 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that people do remember, and young people remember, for the simple reason, as a warning, why we must never, ever go there again.
Yeah.
So I think you've hit the nail, one of the nails right on the head. Next question.
Hello, my name's Kathy, and I'm absolutely in awe of everybody up there, and especially Richard, the emotion coming through. And I can relate to the three T's, because I was living in Northern Ireland and have been through this situation. Richard has said about forgiveness and about his family. My parents also said that they forgive people. Reconciliation came a long time after forgiveness. And I as well think we must never ever go back to the dark days of the Troubles. And I think that integration, reconciliation, and above all, education for the younger people of Northern Ireland, so that they will never have to go back to this. And I think these forums, thank you to Michael, that this is the way forward. Even after 46 years for me, with my family, we're still trying to get answers, we're still trying to get justice, we're still trying to have courage. And thank you for highlighting this. And I think, Peter, you probably have spent time with my family back in the day. And yes, I'm sure you have. And we respected you, and you probably did quite a good job on highlighting our situation. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
If I may just add one thing to what you have just said, and that is, in fact, Richard and I have made a point, and worked jolly hard at it, of giving talks in schools and in secondary education and further education and so on, and indeed in universities. We have made the point there of trying to go to these places and tell our story and talk about it for the very reason that you said. Yeah.
Hello.
The gentleman down here.
Yeah, my name's Joe Campbell. and I think I would represent everybody this evening by saying you're two remarkable gentlemen. You've come on a journey that many people will not understand, but they will think about it forever. For me, the word reconciliation is probably the wrong word. It's taken me a number of years to come to that. Many people were not conciled in the first place to reconcile. I think resolution is probably a better word to use. I'm struck by the forgiveness word, and it seems that the women of the Troubles, who are the heroes, have forgiven probably a lot quicker than the men. My mother forgave the man that murdered my father. I can't, I don't. My brothers and sisters don't. Richard's mother forgave. Eugene Reevy's mother forgave. And many of the other people that I know, their mothers have led their families and friends and communities through very difficult times. So my question really is for Peter. Peter, in terms of what happened on Bloody Sunday, which set the context for a lot of what happened in Derry, do you think that that was a deliberate act as Frank Kitson's strategy in Ireland?
I'm answer no. That may not be a popular answer in some quarters. I do not think that there was a conspiracy planned on high to do what the soldiers of some of the soldiers of one para did on Bloody Sunday. I think it's important, and I mean, you're right to mention Kitson and what the attitude was in Belfast, and Kitson, would summon the paras to do the unpleasant work that they did do in Belfast. And of course, Derry is a very different environment to Belfast. But the climate of the time, to me, was always illustrated by the memorandum, which some of you may be familiar with, that General Ford wrote to General Tuzo, his boss. Ford had been to Derry to listen to the complaints of the business community, which was primarily Unionist and Protestant, who were worried about the so-called Derry young hooligans moving closer and closer every day after rioting to the city centre. And this is 3 weeks before Bloody Sunday, when General Robert Ford wrote to General Tuzo, I think it may be necessary at some stage to shoot the ringleaders of the Derry young hooligans. Now, I don't believe that that was the order, but that's really important as a confidential memorandum which Lord Savile dug out of the archive, because that illustrated, the mood of the time. But I don't think, Kitson played an important role in Belfast, but I think his role is overplayed for political reasons, frankly. But I do not believe that Kitson was involved in giving direction to the paras on what happened on Bloody Sunday. His direction would have been, do in Derry what you do here, deal with the hooligans, deal with the rioting, smash the barricades, which the paras had done to great effect. Remember, Ballymurphy happens 6 months before Bloody Sunday. Anyway, this isn't about me, but that's just answering your question, what my thoughts are on Kitson. I think there is a danger in sort of overemphasising the role of sort of bogeymen, in inverted commas, like Frank Kitson. It was the climate of the time and the events that led up to it, in particular internment that happened 6 months before Bloody Sunday, that produces the Ballymurphy killings of 9 innocent, unarmed civilians in Ballymurphy. That's why Bloody Sunday happened, the climate of the time. I don't think it was orchestrated. Anyway, enough from me. Next question.
Thanks. When Charles mentioned politician, it sort of prompted me to speak. My name's Adam Jogi. I'm the Mayor of Haringey, the youngest mayor in London, and in that spirit, I am very proud of the vibrant Irish community, which Cathy is one of in our part of North London. In my case, so much so, I've managed to find a Belfast woman to marry me, so that's a good sign, and a demonstration of wisdom on my part. But the question with young people in mind, and you've touched on it a little bit, but I'd like Charles and Richard to be explicit, is what would your message be to a 10-year-old on the streets of Derry today?
Sorry, I didn't quite...
What would the message be? What message would you give to 10-year-old children on the streets of Derry today? Charles?
Well, exactly the same as any children, really. In life is for the living. See a way forward. Be normal 10-year-old children. Don't get tied into anything that is, they're Catholics, they must be wrong, or they're Protestants, they must be wrong. No, that's totally wrong. And say, look, we're all people on this planet. We should live together and behave in a civilized way and conduct ourselves in a manner that is fruitful, beneficial to us all, and have fun as kids, and don't get this thing whereby they must be bad. It goes right the way across, unfortunately, the whole of humanity. That person's black, therefore they must be dreadful. That person's white, he must be a slave owner. This is all absolute nonsense, poison, absolute ruddy poison. So children should be brought up, in my view, that all human beings matter, and it doesn't. And you should have a right to have your own beliefs. You should have a right to have your own traditions, and people should respect those things.
Richard,
simple.
Sorry. Richard, what's your advice to a 10-year-old child?
There's probably not one single bit of advice. You could go on at a very simple level and look at me, look at my experience, look at what I've had to deal with in life, and ask yourself, is it worth it?
Yeah.
And like, conflict isn't worth it. But I do think there's got to be a bigger picture, really, to make sure that we've got to focus, I think, how we educate children in terms of compassion, love, empathy, caring for others. So when you see a situation that we build in, and I think we work very hard to take this out of people, it's almost like an oil well that we kept. And this natural response, when you respond to an incident or you respond to the pain of somebody else, that you respond from the heart. And I honestly think if we can, through our education system, begin to work on children, that they respond with compassion and empathy to others, instead of responding in another way, then I think children will be equipped with a capacity to be able to deal with situations like Northern Ireland, like their community, in a way that would be very different.
I'm sure that many of you have seen Kenneth Branagh's film Belfast. I watched it 2 nights ago, and I was very moved by it. I think it's a sort of rose-tinted view of Belfast in 1969, but that apart, one thing that really affected me, which is relevant to what we're just talking about, is the young Kenneth Branagh, who is on the brink of being dragged into what would have been a Protestant paramilitary organisation, and the struggle that he has and the pressures he has to join, and what happens if he doesn't. And in the end, it's his mother who drags him back. And I think that illustrated the enormous pressure on, I don't know, he was actually 10 or 11 at the time. It just shows how powerful that drag is. If you're not with us, you're against us. Whose side are you on? And I think that was one of the most powerful moments of the film. Next question. Gentleman here.
Thank you very much. Taking up the education point, isn't segregated education in Northern Ireland really part of the problem? How can we have a situation where mainline taxpayers here fund different schools for Protestants and Catholics? It's a complete nightmare at any time, but even more so now.
Good, simple, direct, important question.
It is. Well, both my children went to a Catholic school, and I don't believe that they are sectarian. So I'm not saying you're wrong, by the way. I think obviously if people are educated together, then they have a lot to learn from each other. But I think it's deeper than that. And I think, it's my role in relation to my children. Like, my mother I believe, my mommy and daddy, both stopped the cycle of anger, hatred, sectarianism, prejudice in our house. Why was I not bitter? Why was I not angry? Why am I not sectarian? Because of my mommy and daddy. I didn't learn sectarianism at school. I didn't. And I'm being honest. But I think my mother and father's influence over me was very important. I think your role is important in the lives of your children. How I refer to what I teach my children, what I say, what I do, has an effect. And I think that's very important. But I also think if children are educated together, then I can't see it being a bad thing, to be honest.
But integrated education is a minuscule share of education in Northern Ireland. Your thoughts, Charles, on the lack of integrated education or education in really...
My feeling is that it goes back to this basic thing of respect your people for their own beliefs and so forth, but for goodness sake, when it comes to education, surely a Catholic child needs educating just as much as a Protestant child. So what is the problem? In this country, in the United Kingdom, nobody says, for example, are you a Protestant, are you a Catholic, or are you whatever, or do you not believe in anything? You just get educated. And I think that you can go forward with it and have an integration, and I believe it can work extremely well. I don't see there is a big problem. And equally, though, if you want to have schools that are strictly of one religion or the other, then I would say somewhere along the line there has got to be some form of integration, because otherwise it's fertile ground for feeling, oh well, we're better, we're closer to the Almighty than they are for some reason or another, which is obviously an extremely unhealthy situation. So as far as I'm concerned, any form of ability to create integration, why can't we have schools where you've got Muslims, you've got Buddhists, you've got the whole lot, and respect each other, but still be educated?
We have to remember that we have denominational schools here too. We have Catholic schools, Church of England schools, we have Islamic schools. Yeah. Gentlemen, I think it's a gentleman.
Thanks very much. It was just a question for Charles. Obviously this incident happened in 1972, sort of early on in the conflicts, and I was just wondering if you sort of continued to be a soldier in Northern Ireland during this time, and if you did, I'm guessing you found yourself in similar situations, whether it affected your thinking or your decision making, or if in the sort of short term you were able to move on from it as such.
The reality was you moved on. I did move on. But as I said, in quiet moments, the sadness and the regret of what I had done, of blinding this 10-year-old boy, remained with me. But I did move on, and I was there. This particular tour was a so-called 6-month tour. We were there slightly longer than that. But basically, we went out in January of '72, and we were back, basically, all of us, by about August. And historians, by and large, would agree that 1972 was probably about the most violent year of the so-called Troubles. We had a situation where a policeman, a soldier, or a prison officer was killed almost on a daily basis. I had 2 soldiers in my organization blown to pieces. It was an incredibly violent time. And that police station we're talking about, which was so stupid from a military point of view, was an absolute prime target for the Provisional IRA. It couldn't have been placed in a more unsensitive place. Right in the middle of the strongest part of the Catholic nationalist community, and it was there as a red rag to a bull. We were shot at almost on a daily basis. We had, in the time I was there, we had around about 15 nail bombs chucked over the wall. It was absolutely hellish and extremely unpleasant. And you know, that was the situation then. I finished my tour, and then in 1979, I went back to Ireland, not in uniform, and I spent 18 months in Ireland. And again, I had times when life was, shall we say, pretty stressful, putting it mildly. But one thing that never changed never changed me at all, and my willingness to go back to Ireland was my wish, which we didn't succeed in doing, but my wish to make life better for the ordinary, decent people of that country who I absolutely loved, right across the spectrum of the political divide. Wonderful, wonderful people, a lovely nation, but in a situation which was absolutely horrific.
Any more? Person, just at the back. Yeah.
Hi. All I was just going to say is, surely part of reconciliation, yes, acceptance, is it not acknowledgement? And, sorry, rather than acceptance, isn't it acknowledgement as well, by everyone, acknowledge what they've done, and not keep using the 3 Ds, you know, deny, delay, death, kicking the can down the road? I mean, how long can they keep kicking it down? They'll keep kicking it down. And for the legacy issues to cut off is another part of that, is it not?
When you say they, who are the they you're referring to?
The government, the army, the police, all of them. Because the police looking into now, is it Denham and Canova, the officers looking into that. It's an education for them. They were clueless about anything in Northern Ireland.
I was asked to give a talk, an informal talk to the Canova John Boucher's team when he started out. I was asked to do it because John Boucher said, you know, my team are experienced, but they have no experience or knowledge whatsoever about Northern Ireland, and they're still doing it. And no doubt they're still learning. Sorry, so what was the question?
Yeah, about acknowledgement, is it?
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think there needs to be acknowledgement, and I think that's part of the problem. The other question you've got to ask is, look, what's the motivation behind drawing a line, this amnesty they're talking about? What really is the motivation? And it's a questionable motivation. Is it to get British soldiers or policemen off the hook? Or what? Is it right to force a solution onto people, especially victims, who never wanted to be victims, but they're in that situation? And now they've been told, you haven't got justice for the last 30 years, and now you're not going to get justice because it's for the greater good. And I don't see how that's for the greater good. I genuinely don't. Now, there is an argument to say perpetuating the discussion is not for the greater good either. And I understand that argument. But I do think, I don't know the way forward. I really don't. But I do think there's got to be an acknowledgement that wrong was committed. And I think Saville went quite a bit way towards that. But I think it's wrong to say to a family, that's it now, sure.
So, answering the question, acknowledgement is crucial.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that was the fundamental starting point with the relationship between Richard and I. I never for one moment said that I was ordered to fire that bullet. I have stood up in front of thousands of people and said, no, the decision was solely mine. It was my responsibility. It was I who did it. I accept totally the responsibility for doing it. And to me, that was a starting point of a really solid foundation, because I was never going to deny to Richard that, oh no, I was told to do it, or didn't. No, it was my problem right from the start. And I accept that, and
Yeah.
then thereafter we could move forward.
I think we have time for just 2 more questions.
Thank you. Yeah, those few last contributions really got my mind swirling. Let me try and put my question as succinct as I can. I primarily address it initially to Richard. Do you ever look back on that situation and become critical of the establishment, the British government, the higher echelons of the army that put you as a very young man in that position? And that leads me to a parallel question of the prosecution of the lower ranks of the British Army individuals, criticism of individual officers in the RUC, but they were all young men put in a terrible position. Now, prosecuting them lets off the hook the people at higher levels of the establishment who took the decisions. Now, I acknowledge in reality that hierarchy is never going to be questionable, but it's made me doubt whether you should prosecute individual soldiers, individual police officers. Again, I made the point, they were young men, they were inherently trained by the establishment, put in an untenable position by the establishment. It's the establishment, the British government, that's where we should be aiming our criticism rather than individuals.
Thank you. What through answer? Richard.
Yeah, the question is, did I think back and blame the establishment? Is that right?
I think the point of the question is that the high-ups, the generals, the politicians, don't take the blame. It's the poor, bloody infantry. The people who some believe are responsible, the politicians, the generals, get away with it. It's the soldiers who face the music. That's basically what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could say that, and I would say that some of the arguments previously around Bloody Sunday, for example, would have been, is that what we're suggesting, that there was an order given and people didn't carry out the duties, the orders that they were told to do, and that certainly is a
I don't think that's true, but anyway.
No, you don't think it's true, I understand that, but what I'm saying is that's one of the theories floating about. You know, I do struggle, to be fair, just since you mentioned it, you know, that you don't believe it. I do struggle with how a whole, you know, how a regiment was able to go and do what they done, you know, in the way that they did it, without some kind of authority from above. I'm maybe stopping short of saying it was decided by Prime Minister Heath or whoever was there at the time, but I do wonder how they were able to do it. But in terms of, I think whoever pulls the trigger is responsible, first of all, and I don't think that should be minimised. You know, I think whoever pulls the trigger, whoever plants the bomb, they are responsible for what they do. But you're right, it's not a single subject. I think then there's a wider situation about, you know, who was involved in that decision, where did even the sense of it's okay to do that emanate from. And then that's when you widen it all out. I come from a community that supported violence against the British Army, that supported violence against police officers. You know, I would be telling you a lie tonight if I didn't think that I came from a community that some way tacitly supported that. I believe British soldiers come from a society. I was telling a journalist the other day about an article that was in one of the Sunday newspapers back in 1972, not long after I was shot. And my mother was in the kitchen reading it, and it wrecked her completely. And it said, the woman whose brother was shot dead on Bloody Sunday And the woman whose son was blinded by the British Army should have been out looking after her family. And that she was in some way responsible. So that's all right, we get over that. But the point I'm trying to make is, there is a society that thinks what our boys do is okay. And that society gives endorsement. And I'm talking about, you can see it in Iraq, you can see it in other wars at the minute. What our boys do is okay. And that's where everybody, including the army generals, including the establishment, and including the communities that we come from, have to take a level of responsibility. We can't deny it when it's not comfortable anymore.
Charles, do you want to?
No, I think Richard has said it.
Okay.
He said it.
Okay.
He said it.
I think with that, one last question.
Oh, yeah.
And then we'll have to call it
This
today.
is a question for Richard. My name is Margaret. I'm from County Donegal, and I work with sometimes special needs people in this country. I wonder, have you managed to maintain, without vision, to retain the special need of the 4 seasons of the year? I look out my garden to see the snowdrops growing, the daffodils ready to bloom. Do you miss all of that?
I do. I miss not seeing things that, I miss colours. I see colour. People often ask me about blindness. So in my mind's eye, I see everything. I see Peter sitting there. I see Charles over there. I see all of you sitting down there smiling up at us, hopefully. And, I see that. It mightn't be what it actually looks like. But so that's all right. How I see it is how I see it. But I sometimes miss the reality of it. I miss daylight, for example. Not seeing daylight. And I do miss the colours and the changes that happen and all them lovely things. As a child, I can remember up in Malin Gardens at the Craigan at night looking up at the starry plough. And I was only whatever age I was, 8 or 9 years of age, and it used to mesmerise me really. And I must not been able to do things like that. So that's always going to be there. But I compensate in my mind's eye. But one of the great things about blindness, and I suppose it feeds into this conversation, and Peter's probably thinking, Richard, shut up now, right? I'll get home. But, don't you be nodding in agreement now? But, one of the great things about blindness, I always say, is you see the person first. And what I mean by that is, look, you're all sitting down there. I don't know what colour your skin is. I don't know what, you could be sitting there with a Union Jack wrap around you. You could be sitting there with a tricolour wrap around you. You could be sitting there with something else. And to be honest, it doesn't matter to me. And that's one of the greatest things and one of the greatest gifts about blindness. So with all the losses that I have, I love the fact that when you see somebody from a blind perspective, you see the person first.
And on that note, I'd just like to say thank you to Charles and thank you to Richard for a remarkable and utterly honest, disturbing, reflective, but really important session this evening. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is an annual event, and every year I'm pledged with finding a theme to present our conference. And I think tonight was probably one of the very, very best, and I'm very grateful to these gentlemen. Give them a huge round of applause. Thank you so much.